you been looking for a podcast to help you transform your physical and mental? One that'll shoot you straight between the eyes with truth and no BS, helping you have the right mindset to accomplish things, the iron will and fortitude to follow through with what you say you're going to do. No excuses. Mark owns martial arts schools, and after 30 years, he has some real insight for real talk, real life, real conversations, motivational, fitness, self-defense, weight loss, live from the Great 1-8. This is Real Talk with Mark Cox.
All right. Good morning. Good morning. Well, it's afternoon where you're at. I hear you're out in Canada, from what I understand. Correct?
That's right. Toronto.
So I guess there's a 3-hour difference from us here, right? Pacific time to you got a 3-hour time. So it's noontime with you. Yeah. So good afternoon. Good morning to all my listeners here. Is it great?
Mark, go ahead.
Yes. I'm looking forward to having a good conversation with you today. Always look forward. I've got a lot of people from Canada that I've interviewed. Good people out there, awesome entrepreneurs out there. Always had, very, very exciting guests every time I come in. So looking forward to spending some time with you today and talking about your expertise. So with no further ado, Glenn, I'm going to let you go ahead and take the mic real quick, introduce yourself to the audience, and let's get rocking and rolling.
Thanks for having me, Mark. Great to be here. And it's a nice day. It's getting nicer, actually. It's a little rainy earlier, but it's clearing up now. And are you in California or?
I'm in California. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm in little suburbs of.
My understanding is you guys don't usually bring up the weather, but where I live, the weather's the first thing you start talking about every day. It's like, is it warm? Is it cold? Is it raining? Is it snowing? Right. And I think yours is kind of like sunny every day, right? And
yes,
we do not have that, but happy to be here. And do you want me to give you some background or?
Yes. Go ahead. Go ahead and introduce yourself to our audience, and then give us a little bit of your background, and we'll dive right in.
Right on. So sort of a lifelong salesperson and sales and sales related. So I've started a couple of companies. I started in the federal government. They told me I was working too fast and too hard, and they told me to go get a job somewhere else. So I went and got a job in sales, and did that for a few years. I started a business, which I sold in the early 2000s. And I then started another business in sales company, and sold that in February of 2022, which is the same month that I launched my book as well. And so that was a busy month for sure. And now I'm actually working for the company that bought my company. So I agreed to stay on with them and help them with the integration. And so now I've gone from entrepreneur to employee, and I now have a boss, and I got to check in and tell them where if I'm not going to be there, and that kind of a thing. And so I've just sold a business, taken over half of their company in North America. So I was handling all aspects of my business, finance, operations, everything, as well as sales, marketing, and what have you. And now I'm changed into a role where I'm really focused on the sales for their company, the marketing, and the customer service experience, as well as the back-end IT supporting all that. So it's kind of a bit of a shift for me. It's pretty new. And so I'm still getting my feet wet, adjusting. I was really a Canadian guy running a Canadian company that did a little bit in the US, and now I'm North American. I'm in the US every week, and all the US people on that side of the team report to me, and really jumping in the deep end. And so far it's been fun, and it's been exciting. But like a lot of industries right now, the market's been challenging in the last little while. So we're in telecom, and telecom's been down for 2023.
So it's been down a little bit. So tell me what the difference is. Tell me how that shift is going from building a company, selling the company, working for the company. Is it weird? Is it weird going from the boss to having one?
Très weird, as they say in French-speaking And it's very weird. And it's okay, and really you have to, the biggest thing to be frank about it and honest, is the ego part of it, right? And because when you own the business, you're kind of the boss, and everybody recognizes you as the boss, and that's fine and what have you. And then when you sell the business, I mean, and you're in the beginning, they're looking at you as the guy that sold their company to their new company, and it's kind of unsure where you fit in. But eventually, you find yourself in a role. And you have to basically say, hey, can I be happy with the role that I'm serving in this much bigger company now? And it's not about being the boss of everything anymore. I mean, they don't need to bring every decision to you, just the things where you have an impact, right? Your circle of influence, kind of. And so, kind of dealing with my own ego is the biggest challenge. But since I've become comfortable with how the work's been divided up and where I fit in, I've actually embraced it, and I'm feeling good about it. But it was rough there for a few weeks while I was giving up the reins on all these departments that I used to be responsible for, and that's the biggest challenge. And but other than that, it's been good.
Yeah, that's good. So, do you have this in mind when you do this? Do you kind of did you have the idea to build a business and then sell it, or is that something that is in your wheelhouse? Saying, hey, I'm going to build this, I'm going to sell it, I'm going to start another one and sell it, or did it just kind of come about?
Yeah, it was more, it was not sort of a plan, sort of do this, sell, what have you. They both were around 15 years old, the companies, when I sold them. I was too young to retire when I sold the other business, and that company had changed directions, and ultimately I had to go and do something different. So it was easier for me to start another company than it was to go and get a job. I wasn't sure where I would fit in. And
right.
And of course, the company was a true startup. I mean, that first year we only did I think around $800K or something in business, but we grew to $80 million. And so the business grew in those 15 years significantly. And but along the way, people came along kicking the tires, wanting to buy the business. So it was always in the back of your mind, because once you get a few years old and business brokers can find you, and however they find companies, they start calling and say, hey, we've got interested buyers, just like real estate agents do, right? They knock on your door and says, oh, I got interested buyers in the neighborhood. Have you ever thought of selling your house? Same thing with your business, right? But when you're in it for a few years, and then you see where you're at in your earning cycle and the multiples that you're going to get for the business, it's like, well, no, it's too soon. I mean, I don't want to give up 4 or 5 years work for that amount, right? And you think I got to wait till it's bigger. And then eventually you get to the point where, it becomes, hey, is it really going to grow more, or is it going to level off? Could it go down? And, what's your age? And also, we were getting to a size where, in order to get much bigger, we would have needed capital that myself and my business partner couldn't have accessed readily. We wouldn't, we just didn't have the personal financial depth to get the kinds of lines of credit and things that we would have needed. And so we would have had to take on partners no matter what. So it became the right time to sell.
So now let's get into the book a little bit. So
sure.
When did you decide to write a book? Be an author.
Well,
and what drove you to do that?
Yeah. So to be honest about my procrastinating ways, I'm like, well, why do something today that I can procrastinate until tomorrow? So I started writing the rules down in the 80s, believe it or not. Those were the 1980s, a long time ago. When I was on the road selling, and I was noticing what all these guys were doing. I started writing down these rules, and I had this handbook, right, that I was keeping for myself. And I would name some of the rules after people and situations that I would see. And, I started sharing the stories back then, and some people they'd laugh at some of the stories and what have you. They're like, oh, can you come to my work and share the stories? And so I did that for a little while back then. And people are like, oh, you should write a book. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I should write a book. And of course, I never did. And then, but over the years, the chapters sort of like in this little notebook grew and grew and grew. And I always kept the book. And when the pandemic hit, I thought that was March of 2020, right? In Canada, it was on full lockdown. Couldn't go anywhere on the weekends, at night, whatever. I was able to come to work because my work was a deemed special service or whatever they were calling it, and I had to come and open the warehouse and ship products every day. But at night and on the weekends, I was stuck at home, and I thought, hey, what better time to write that book? And so I sat down and sort of buckled down, and it took me about 9 months to write it. But that was sort of when I finally got up the gumption to do it. Although I'd been telling myself since 1985 that I was gonna do it, right?
So tell me about what's the name of your book first, so the audience can hear.
So it's called Never Sit in the Lobby, and that's one of the rules that they will come across in the book.
Let's talk about the top 3 rules that you have in your book. Okay.
So there's 57 tips for building a career in a business and selling, and so it depends on the day which ones are the best ones, but I have some that are fun that flow together. And I just actually had a guy in my office a minute ago, and he rhymed off 4 rules in one sentence, right? He's like, I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, right? And I'm like, that's good. Maybe one day he'll have a podcast. And he goes, yeah, I might even write a book. And so one of the rules is the name of the book. So I'll tell you, I'll rip the Band-Aid off that one to explain it, what that means. And so what I mean by never sit in the lobby is when I'm talking to people that eventually need to visit customers to close business, not virtualized businesses that don't do anything in the real world, like that they do everything virtually. I'm selling high ticket items. These are telecom related products or whatever, but at some point we need to visit our customers and show them the products, let them evaluate the products, and many other people that I talk to. Ultimately, they do need to visit the customers in order to close the business. So when you get to the lobby and you've announced yourself and you're waiting for the guy or gal to come down and see you, don't sit down, right? Like, don't be sitting down playing on your phone, playing, Candy Crush or some game like that, waiting for the guy to come. Be standing in the lobby, waiting at attention for the guy to walk through the door, right? And that's one of my golden rules. I never sit down in the lobby. And so, one of the other rules that goes with that rule is when the guy walks in, always have something in your hand and something in your mind, right? Like, always have something to hand to the guy when he walks through the door. Sometimes, we're in Canada, we have the famous Tim Hortons donuts, which is your equivalent of Dunkin' Donuts, but Tim Hortons, the famous hockey player, and and people are crazy about Tim Hortons here in Canada, and so sometimes in the morning you bring in donuts and you're handing the guy some donuts for his staff, or maybe it's literature, a quote, maybe it's a promo item, maybe it's a mouse pad or a water bottle or a pen or something that you're giving away. And always have something in your mind that you want to talk to him about right at that moment, right? And the next rule that follows after something in your hand, something in your mind, is always ask him for a mini tour. And people are like, what's a mini tour? And I'm like, well, a mini tour is a tour that's mini. And it's just not a big, long tour. It's just like, can you show me where you're going to be using my product? Can I see where you're going to be setting it up? Can I see the environment that it'll be in? But trying to get yourself beyond that front door if it wasn't already scheduled to take you back there, right? Because when you're getting to that location, maybe it's something in a new lab or a new warehouse or a new production area or whatever, you're going to see all the competitors' products, right? And if you're a good sales guy, you're picking up, hey, I could be coming back later talking to them about this and this and this and this. And then you say, wait a minute, I'm bringing in some sort of widget, and I see they're already running my widgets with someone else, and there's 9 of them, and so the guy wants another one. So am I really there to sell him a widget, or am I there to keep the original vendor honest, right? You're never going to see that unless you get behind the front door and into the guy's place of business. And that's where you start to see, the coffee mugs, whose name do they have on them? Your competitor, that kind of a thing, right? And then one of the other rules goes with that exact same. I know that's 3 of, but I'll give you a 4th one, right? Is when you're in your car out front waiting for, the appointed time, you don't want to be sitting in the lobby. So you don't want to stand in the lobby too long either. That's awkward. So I suggest you get there a few minutes early in your car. When you get there, whip out your phone, go to that account, and lists all the names in your CRM that at that account, like Sally, Jack, Bob, Sam, whatever, and do what I call re-remembering their face, right? So you go, hey, Jack, oh yeah, that's the guy. He's bald, Bob, whatever. He's tall. Sally's that redheaded lady, whatever it is to take to remember their face and bring it all the way from your memory way in the back, all the way to the front of your mind. So that when you're on the mini tour and he's walking you down to the facility to see where your products are going to be going or being used or whatever, and those people start walking past you, and they probably may or may not remember you, but you could be like, hey, Jack, hey, Sally, hey, George, or whatever. And they're like, oh, right, that's Glenn, da, 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 da. And the guy who's taking you there is like, this guy knows everybody. And these are all ways of looking and acting like you have social proof within the environment, right? That's like 4 of the very quick barrage of rules that I follow religiously of the 57 that are in the book, right? And
so that interesting. Now, this is what was making me interested on your topic, on your expertise in these levels. Do you feel that, of course, everything's a personal relationship, right? That's the first thing that if you want to, it doesn't really matter. Even in our business here, like I tell all my students, I said, the selling isn't in the sales office. The selling's on the mat. If they're going to enjoy class and they like you and they feel that you got something to give themselves or their children, the sales part's already done. It's manipulating numbers and to make it work for their budget.
Yeah.
The selling happens on the mat. The personal excellence happens on the mat.
Great line.
In a martial arts world, old school martial arts back in the day, I guess I would say, is they would, if the mentality was, you're lucky you're at my school, right? The master's here, and what the master says, everybody does, that kind of thing. And the martial arts world had to take a shift and realize that people are clients and customers, not just you're lucky you're learning from, the guru himself. You found out real quick that, you're not going to be in business very long if you have that. What you're going to have is a business that you do after your regular job, right? not what you do full time.
Yeah.
Do you feel do you feel what you're talking about? Now you go out and you're a salesperson. How do you feel like when you're going out, even to get a coffee these days? Do you feel that personal sales tactics at all?
Well, yeah, just to lead into the answer, which I will give you, is that I do agree with you that selling is done on the mat. And when people ask me, like, what is the mantra behind your book or behind your day-to-day? And so I always say the same thing. My philosophy is how to get, act, and stay in front of your clients and be a pleasure to do business with always. Emphasis on the word always, right? And so I'm trying to show people how to not be a pain in the ass with customers, right? And, like where you're, the arrogance, just like you're talking about, hey, come to my school because I've got the best dojo in town or whatever. I'm saying, like, don't act like, hey, you've got the best brand and it's some honor that you're showing up to sell the product, right? That's not a pleasure to do business with. And when you lose, how do you behave? Probably poorly, right? And so I'm all about the rapport, right? And so for me, rapport is everything. And so do I see good rapport out there in the world? Some places I do. To be honest, I don't go in that many stores because, I have all these little personal quirks and things. Like, I don't really buy a lot of coffee and stuff like that. I do sometimes pick up donuts for the customer, but I'm usually in the drive-through. And, sometimes you'll go in a location to get a snack or something. And, the difference between the well-run places where they're a pleasure to do business with and where they're not, it's standout. And where we have a little cottage we call it up north in Toronto, where you go out of the city for the weekend and, a couple weeks in the summer, there's a place, and we go out of our way to get our sandwiches there and, coffees and things like that, because it's a family run business, and the way they run it and the way they treat you, it makes you feel special. Right. But a lot of places, somewhere along the lines, they've lost some of that. And I'm sort of agreeing with what you were saying before. You were asking me, do I see it? Yeah, I do see it some places, but everywhere, definitely not. Right?
I feel, I don't know. I think that myself, if I can have a genuine concern about what others do, and I try and, you tell me if this is a good tactic or not. I just know that naturally I kind of gravitate to what people like. Maybe I see something they're wearing, right? Maybe I see a Rocky shirt, or
right.
I see something to that effect, and I said, that's a real love of mine. I mean, I love that Rocky show. I watch it every time I fly.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things that I love, and I remember being a kid watching it. Back then.
Well, I'm laughing about the Rocky thing because you're leading me right into one of my chapters of my book. Not the Rocky thing, but but carry on, and I'll answer the question, or if you have a question, or I think I'm in.
Yes, and I just think that I see this quite often. Even if I'm sitting next to somebody in a plane, if I can just kind of catch something that they have that is of interest, and I'll ask them, it's kind of a topic. My topic is, I don't have a sleeveless shirt on today. I do, but I got tattoos all over my arms, right? And I got some really cool tattoos, and they are a conversation piece. Everybody asks about them, and it just kind of opens up doors,
right?
And it just kind of does that. So I'm just wondering if that's one of these tactics that you have,
right? So I'm really glad you asked that, because you're leading me right into one of my chapters, but it's kind of counterintuitive what I'm going to say. So, normally, so for me, building rapport is really important, right? But the mistake a lot of people make, and this is the difference, you're saying like, oh, the guy has a Rocky shirt on, or I have the tattoos, right? Well, I mean, the tattoos are like, inked right on your body. You probably decided to put them there, right? So it's a safe bet that you want them there, right? But I talk in the book about guys making false assumptions, and I call it implied familiarity also breeds contempt, meaning don't be too quick to jump to what you think the guy likes because you've seen something in his environment. And the story that I tell is, and I'll show you how I deal with it after as well, but the story that I tell is going into a guy's office, and I saw a photo with him and another guy holding fish, right? Some bass or something. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't know you were a fisherman, and I love fishing, and I got a boat up north near my cottage, maybe we should go fishing sometime. And the guy looks back and he looks at the thing and he goes, oh my God, he goes, that's my ex-father-in-law. He goes, I'm actually divorced now, and he goes, you know what? I fucking hate fishing. Pardon my language, but I hate fishing. He goes, I only went on those fishing trips because my wife made me, and he grabs the photo, takes it, tosses it in the garbage. And he goes, I hope I never have to go fishing again. And of course, what I did was I took him from a neutral state to a highly charged negative state, right? Because I assumed that because I saw him and a fish and a man, that all he did was fish, and that I should impart myself. I should have asked him, what's the story behind the fish, right? And he would have gone, and then, or what's the story behind the, the iron cross or something on your arm, right? Like, tell me the story. Like, don't be careful not to be presumptuous or over presumptuous in your assuming like things about it because it's like on his shirt or on his arm or on his desk or on his wall, right? Ask questions. Don't imply yourself, over implicate yourself upon the guy, right?
Interesting. Yes, that really is a good take, to be honest with you, because I've done the same type of mistakes before on that same thing. So that was
like for you, it'd be I noticed like a girl on your shoulder or something, right? I'm like, oh, Matt, like a pretty looking girl. He goes, oh, that's my ex-wife.
Yeah. See, but people ask me that, and I go, that's not a pretty girl. That's my mother.
Right. Exactly.
So right. Yeah. That's my mom when she was 18.
Yeah.
And and then it will strike up a conversation. But yeah, I definitely have. I definitely use those as a. It's weird too. There's sometimes you want to kind of be quiet.
Yeah.
And then people ask you a lot of questions. You're like, man, can you just shut the frick up for just 1 second, man? Okay. I'm just not in that frame of mind. So I guess that's a give and take. I guess that's just over time and what you decide and life itself. I just know as I've gotten older, right, my tactics from a young guy to where I'm at today, because I'm 62 years old. I'm not a young dude anymore, right? Like I used to be. I live in a young man's world, but I'm definitely not a young man in this young man's world.
Yeah. I'm 61.
I'm one of those, right. You're 61. Yeah. So we're right in the same, same wheelhouse. I see myself, where I was and where I'm kind of trying to do. And to be honest with you, one of the things that caught me with you today is you are in the sales world. And I tell all my instructors, I said, you'd be surprised that everything you do is kind of a sales in sales. Yeah. You're selling yourself to somebody. You're selling yourself to a parent. You're selling yourself on the classes. You're selling the students. Are you the good instructor? Are you the one they all want to come and be with? Does the school revolve around your care because of how you teach class? So everything is, I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, everything is, I don't want to say a tactic, but it imparts sales of some sort. Right. You are in sales.
Yeah.
So if and most of it is trying to sell yourself. I really don't care what kind of profession you're in. I think that's broad across all, and I guess that's the other thing. I said, you've been in front of instructors that it's about the instructor. It's not about how he's helping you.
Yeah.
Hey, look at me. Look what I can do. Look at my, look on how I do things, and not listen. And let me demonstrate how to do it. Now let me give you the power to be able to do what I do.
Right. I talk about that in the book a lot, actually. And
do you?
Well, yeah.
Now, do you go ahead? Let me hear your thoughts on that.
So I talk about that in the chapter called WSP, which I call winning sales presence. But really what it is it's basically showing the client, the sort of showing them what it is that becomes naturally attractive to them. Like, don't say, look what I can do, and then decide if you want to buy. That's not what I would do, right? What I would do is I would say, you know what, like your kids are 7 or whatever. Let me get Jack and Jade or whatever, these two, boy and girl. They're like 13. They've been in the program with me for 4 years, whatever. They're X belt with this stripes or whatever. Let me get them to do a demonstration for you on, where you could be in a few years if you decided to join my program. And then you give them a demonstration, which creates without any bragging, without any braggadocious manner to you, right? Like when you see me doing this and my black belt and my this and my that, you can't help but buy my stuff. Like that's not attractive, right? But as I always teach people, attraction's not a choice. Like when you see something and you're amazed by it, you just are, right? When you're attracted to it, you see like for some people, you see a nice car, you love it, right? Or you see a nice, it could be anything in any environment where you're looking at things that interest you. Could be a boat, could be or it could be a series of martial arts moves, right? And the kid sees that and he's like, "Oh, mom," he goes, "That's what I want. That's how I want to be." Whatever. Then you haven't said anything, right? You haven't done any selling or whatever. The next thing that happens after that is the mom says, "How do I get my kid involved in your program?" Right? And you can then say, okay, well, we've got the beginners and the intermediate thing, the twice a week, the 4 times a week or whatever. You don't have to prove anything at that point, because when you've done what I call the perfect presentation, which I call the punch, and for your business, it's really funny because I call it the punch, perfect pitch, and close, right? And the punch is where you change their state, right? And that's where maybe, you bring the kid in and say, look, before we do any talking about the program or whatever, let me just give you a demonstration. And then you basically shock them by showing them how amazing something is, right? How fast a car is, how quick a machine is, how beautiful some art is, or how great your instructors can perform, right? And then the perfect pitch, is, I always talk about the power of 3. And that's in the book, the Goldilocks principle, not too hot, not too cold, just right, that kind of thing, right? Mild, medium, hot, good, better, best. But you present your program to them, and then the mom would say, how much is it? Then you've done the right job. You don't have to ask them, do you want to go ahead with it? Do you want to get your kid involved? When you've done the perfect pitch, the customer closes themselves, right? And it's all about how you demonstrate attractive qualities. And I mean, a bragger, that you know, like, you think the difference between a really pretty woman who doesn't do anything but stand there, and a man who's standing there bragging with his pumping his chest out or whatever, right? You want to actually find the balance between that and just be naturally attractive in the environment where your product is operating, and let the customer experience it, right?
I think, yes, right. I think that's a completely valid on what you're talking about. It's so in line, you know, that's why I thought that this is why I kind of reached out to you, because I was like, man, he's got some really good points, because I looked through your stuff and your websites and everything that you have. And of course we have experience also. Now,
Right.
so you've built Sun, you've sold stuff, you built a company, you sold a company, you built and sold, and you've done what you've done. And I can tell you that the last property I just bought, I'll tell you how I got it, because there were so many people that jumped on it. I bought a little piece of property out in Georgia. I have a couple properties out there. This one came across on Facebook Marketplace, believe it or not. And I'm like, wow, this little Airbnb, I want to get this. I want to get this on 5 acres of land. You can't buy stuff like this in California. You know what I mean?
No,
without spending $1.5 million.
Yeah.
And it was my rapport that I got with the buyers that got me that house.
Yeah.
Because they had a lot of cash offers. They had a lot of other stuff, but my rapport with them is what sold it. Yeah. And it's just one of those things that we just had a lot of stuff in common. I've asked the right questions. I wasn't too pushy. I said, I really want to do this, hang in there with me. Let me get my finances. And they did. And I ended up getting that piece of property, and we're still friends today, believe it or not. I bought the piece of property from them, and I'll call them up and say, hey, give me some feedback when you guys had the home. Did you guys be able to use executives from these places? And we just become friends after that.
Yeah.
And I think that's where it is relationships. Correct.
Yeah. And rapport, I mean, that's probably one of my most favorite words, right? Is you want to get and maintain rapport with the client. And I mean, it's difficult to do because people are nervous and they want to, they want to do their presentation that they've been practicing or whatever, when really the customer prefers the sound of their own voice, right? And you need to be getting them, what problem are you trying to solve today, right? And not, let me show you my PowerPoint slides of my company and how great we are, right? And and so it's all about the rapport, right? And that's why I go on about in the book about for quite a bit on active listening, and also on the power of empathy, sympathy, and compassion, right? And learning and knowing what the difference is and when to apply them, right? And for the audience, they're like, oh, well, what does that mean? Because a lot of times people say, oh, I'm so empathetic. And I'm like, well, the way you're saying it doesn't sound like you're empathetic to me, because you might be sympathetic, but you're definitely not empathetic, because empathy is that you're actually feeling what someone's feeling, right? It's got nothing to do with sympathy or compassion, right? It means you're literally stopping what you're doing, taking your shoes off, going a couple steps over and putting their shoes on, right? Oh, I just lost my job. I got 3 kids at home. My wife doesn't work. Like how does that feel? And you literally internalize those feelings and get inside that person's feelings before you take the next step. That's what empathy is, right? Literally feeling what they feel, right? And sympathy just means you can understand how it feels. Like, oh yeah, I got a fender bender, it's gonna be like $3,000 to fix my car, and I don't want to put it through insurance. Oh yeah, I can imagine that's a real pain in the ass. Like, that sucks. Like, that's sympathy, understanding how they feel, right? And compassion would be, and the guy's like, oh, and I don't have a car to drive or whatever. Maybe you got 3 cars at home. The compassion would be wanting to relieve their suffering. Like, well, if it's only a week, you know what? I've got my Toyota. You can, it's 10 years old. It's not the best, but I can loan it to you for a week. No problem. That's compassion, right? And I'm not saying loan your car to your customer. I'm just saying know the difference between those, when to apply them, because that's how you build the rapport. Because most people are trying to jump from oh, rapport to give me an order, like make me rich, right? Like buy my product. Like that's not rapport, that's greed, right? And and you're not being genuine, or you're genuinely showing a lack of rapport and not trying to build it, right? And so a lot of it boils down to listening more than you talk, right? God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. You do the math, right?
Right. And that's true. That's true. How do you go about telling if you're going to be teaching somebody sales and stuff like that? How do you portray to them how to be genuine, but you're not genuinely concerned because you want to sell, that you are genuinely, because I feel that I feel like I really do enjoy listening to other people's lives. Hey, what have you done in here? This is, oh man, I've experienced the same thing. This is, man, I know the heartache that is because I've experienced that. Like in my world, right? Especially a single dad, right? If I got a single dad, I got a lot of sympathy from him because that's what I was. And I raised my children. I wasn't a weekend dad. I was a single dad. I was a single dad, raised my kids, took care of them, took them to school, raised them to be young adults. And so I have a sympathy for that. And I have a genuine concern. And then, so the other, this is, tell me about this, right?
Yeah.
Trying to see how I think about this, because I do this all the time. Matter of fact, I get so sympathetic. I feel so bad for him that boom, I give him a deal that I wouldn't give anybody else on the sales
That's compassion,
floor.
Actually. That's
right.
compassion. You're trying to relieve their suffering, right?
Right. So I'm like, so I suffer more to relieve other people's suffering because, once you do that, there's the dollars have to go from somewhere to somewhere.
Yes.
And then sometimes when you relieve people's pain, they're not as thankful as you thought they were going to be, right? Down the road, relationships change. And I see this throughout. Now I see it in martial arts worlds all the time because we put so much time into people that we become family.
Yeah.
And it's, so it's a weird business, right? We become family. So like when you duck out, it's a real personal hit.
Yeah.
And it might not even be a personal hit on their side, but I just tell everybody, it's funny because in my world, you become a client, right? Before you become a student, right? You're a client for a long time, for maybe a good 8 months, you're this client. Then all of a sudden you've made some real decisions. Hey, I'm sticking this out to black belt.
Yeah.
Then they become a real student of the art because they're here for the long haul. Yeah. They're going the bumps and bruises along the way. And I'm very upfront. Hey, there's going to be times you want to quit. And when you want to quit is the times you're going to want to win. Yeah. And you can't be like that. They're coming. It's not when, it's not if they come, it's when they come, and they will come. Do you have the fortitude to drive through your weakness in your mind at that point? And because this is what self-control is all about. And this is what we talk about martial arts. It's not about the punching and kicking. I can teach you to kick the shit out of somebody pretty easily. You can give me a few months and I can teach you how to be just an animal like that. But what you need to work on is the self-control not to do it when you want to do it. See, that's the beauty of conquering your mind. That's my world. But I believe that that's a lot in a lot of worlds. I think the sales of what it is. So when you're talking to people that you're teaching about this kind of stuff,
what do I
talk
do?
to me? Talk to the audience about what it's like to get too involved.
You said a bunch, so I'm going to unpack a little bit of what you said. You said you're a single dad, and so you know what it's like. You can easily feel empathy for it because you've been in their shoes. You know what I mean, kind of thing. So that's easy, and you're sympathetic. You can understand what they're going through, and you're compassionate, meaning you want to relieve them. And so, two things I want to address. One. And you're saying later, maybe they don't, for some reason or another, what I was taking away was that they may not be worthy of your empathy, sympathy, and compassion, right? Because just by the way they respond to your generosity. So 2 things. One, there's another chapter in my book called Freedom Begins with No, right? So I'm not a pushover where, oh, look at this guy's all mamby-pamby, soft sell, blah, blah, blah. That's not true at all. That's actually couldn't be farther from the truth. So I train my people all the time that freedom begins with no, right? Like I'm not paying you to go out there and actually, when we've crafted a deal after weeks and weeks, and then you get there and you're delivering the final paperwork to the guy, and then they send you to the closer dude or whatever, like the buyer who says, oh, I need another 3 points. And you say, oh, well, let me go back to my boss and check with him. And then all of a sudden your life goes upside down because now you got to drive all the way back knowing you're going to get shit from me for it or whatever. You just say, no, we've crafted this deal in tandem with you over the last several weeks. We need to get this order on the books in order to get you scheduled in to meet your delivery. And we've come at you with the best price that we can. We just don't have any more room to move. I'm sorry, but the answer is no. And at that point, you're free because you don't have to do anything else after that. Everything goes back to the customer and it's up to them so there becomes a time where you need to say no to people. And I always love telling the story about, like when you're a kid and you're going to go to the movies and it's like, hey, do you want to go to the movies? They're like, no, I can't afford it. You're like, what about you? You want to go to the movies? Okay, I'll go. What about you? No, I can't afford it. What about you? I can't afford it. And so I'll go and I'll go, right? So you don't go back to the other people and go, what do you mean you can't afford it? And like, whatever, right? Like, at least in Canada, when we say I can't afford it, it means don't ask me again. I'm not going. I don't have any money, right? And so freedom, that's like a freedom begins with no. And you need to approach everything like that. The other thing was you said you want to give them a deal or whatever, right? Be compassionate. I do that too. But I try to put built-in, walls around it so that I'm protecting myself. So what I say is like, I know how much it could struggle to be a single dad or whatever. Normally our program is $1,000 a quarter or whatever it costs, right? But for single dads, just to see if the kid's interested or whatever, we like to get you in for the first 90 days with an X% discount or whatever. But because then you're not handicapping your business later by giving them a deal that you have to take out of the hide of the instructors later, right? And then you're being compassionate, you're offering them some relief, but you're trying to say, look, if you want to be in the program 4 days a week or whatever, it's $1,000 a quarter or $250 a month or whatever the price is. But you give them an opportunity to get in on maybe something that the normal person wouldn't get, right? But that doesn't need to be forever. And, and that's the kind of way I approach pretty much everything. And because every deal's different, every customer, every product and whatever, the rules don't apply, like cookie cutter, but the philosophies behind the rules apply and they're universal.
Interesting. That's a great take on that, Glenn. I learned, I took a little bit of notes on that on my pad about what that is, giving them a minimal relief for a few months.
Yeah.
And I guess that does relieve resentment down the road where, hey, listen, I took care of you for this long.
Yeah.
Now we're here.
Yeah.
If you're going to want to revisit, we can revisit at that time and then we can make some decisions. And I guess that's where the power of no, I said, unfortunately, this is the best that I can do.
Yeah. On an ongoing basis.
On an ongoing basis. Yeah. Excellent. That was just an excellent, deal right there. That I'm gonna write one more note on that here. This is what I love about these podcasts. This is the kind of stuff that just kind of comes up that just works universally, because I see this quite often. I've got a lot of students that own schools underneath me, right? I've got 8 schools that are kind of under my toolage, and that they've, they're their own bosses and stuff like that, but we have an organization that they all are underneath me. And I try to help them with this. This is like these kind of podcasts is why I come on here, so I can come in. Hey, listen, I just had this Glenn Poulos on here. His sales tactics are awesome. And I think some of the stuff that we talk about, and it all kind of relates back to me because this is what I do for a living, but I get everybody's expertise because I think business is business regardless of what the business is. Do you agree with that? It doesn't really matter. There's principles across the board. Yeah. It is what it is.
The principles are universal, right? They can be applied, and the rules, and it's just the way you fashion them and put them together is, what makes it work for other businesses or what have you, right? And yeah.
So do when you're going through your stuff, Glenn, if you have an organization or even your own organizations, so you got the sales part of it, how about managing your employees? How much of the tactics in your books go to the managerial side of things? So is there a way to use what you have on the manager side as well as the sales side?
there's lots of tips in there that are related to interpersonal dynamics at work and building your career in selling, right? And the dynamics of interpersonal dynamics are universal, right? So it depends, if you're either, you could be selling a guy on making more calls, or you could be teaching the guy who's making more calls to do more selling, you know what I mean? And a lot of them are universal. And, I do talk a lot in the book about, navigating your career, trading up and this isn't really managing people per se, but I mean, like, one of the things I love sharing with people is, look, if you join a company and you're new in sales and you're cutting your teeth, right? And you find out that, hey, I'm working for the number 4 company in the market. Doesn't matter what it is. I said, look, quit. Like the next day. Like, you need to go work for the number 1, 2, or the number 1 or 2 brand in your business, because you can't reproduce tomorrow, or yesterday, today. Like, you only get one chance at today. And so why would you want to waste your skills, your excellent selling efforts, selling the number 4 brand? Because 98% of the time they're going to buy brands 1, 2, or 3. 80% of the time they're going to buy brand 1. 80% of the rest of the time they're going to buy brand 2. And you're working for like 3 or 4% of the market, right? So don't cut yourself short when you're selling yourself and what the products that you sell. Who wants to sell brand number 4? Quit, get a better job. The second thing is I'd rather be last than second. And people are like, what does that mean? Right? So the guy who's last, he's the one that goes in and he realizes, hey, my instructors, they're black belts, they need X dollars per hour. Like, this is my minimum available viable product that I can offer. And the guy wants sort of like, let's say, kindergarten, stuff where you could have junior kids doing, but you don't have any of those to offer, right? So you don't want to stay through the whole sales process and you go, you know what? I understand you're looking for like kindy sport, stuff. We don't offer that at this dojo. I'm going to recuse myself from the situation and I'm going to let someone else compete for the business, right? You might say, hey, I've got kindy classes at my other dojo down the street or whatever, maybe, but you immediately get out of the situation and stop selling because you're not getting the business. So why are you wasting your time? And I mean, when you're selling products, people often like go to these, let me leave it with you for a week and let me try a free trial and let me fly guys in from the factory to show you why they're better. And, let's do this and let's do that. But really in your heart of hearts, you're not getting the order. You should quit early, because then you can, while the other guy's there selling, you can go to a new customer where you have a better fit. And you can go get that order while his back is turned. And so that's my whole I'd rather be last than second. Because the guy who comes in second, he puts in almost as much effort as the guy who comes in first, and he loses. Right?
Right. Yeah, right. Second place, the first loser.
Exactly.
Right.
I'm sure you know all about that.
Oh, I know about that. Oh, yeah. I've been the first loser many times, man. Yeah. Being the first loser does suck. There's nothing good about it.
No,
for sure. It just lets you know that there's a lot of work for you to do to become the champ that you need to become. And I just think that the analogy of martial arts in the mat world is a lot like business, to be honest with you. We've always trying to navigate a way out. We're trying to find a way out, or we tap out. One of the two is right. So sometimes tap out doesn't mean you lose. It just means, hey, thanks for showing me my weakness. Yeah. Now I'm going to go work on it. And next time I'm tapping you out.
Right.
So, that's tap out is
another way of saying I'd rather be last than second. Right. And
yes, correct.
I mean, why continue to get beat up when you know you don't have the right strength or the right skill or whatever? You're better to tap out and go work on your skill. That's perfect. I mean, I got to write that one down because
yes, there's so much correlation between all of that. It's just powerful. Because the principles that you have are so good for everybody. Because I look back at my weaknesses on some of the stuff I do, and I think the next thing is trying to project yourself on helping others be a better salesperson. There's things that I do naturally. And I am a softie in the sales office, especially when, somebody gives me a good sob story. I get emotionally connected because I'm a little bit older, being where I was. And I tell my salespeople, I said, if I get too emotional, I'm dropping out and I'm bringing somebody else in. I'm passing the torch, and I'm going to get, whether it's Ashley or my son Michael. And I said, hey, hey, I've got an appointment. I'm going to have my son take this over, because I know that they're not going to have the same emotional connection. They're going to get the money that needs to be getting for the business. Yeah. If it's me, I'm going to be a softie, and everybody and their mother is going to, because I did this so early on when I was doing everything. I did when how it is when you first start a business. You're everybody. You're the janitor to the CEO. It's just what you are. Yeah. And so I did all that, from the sales and all that, and I know what I can do. I know and I'm as hardcore as I am. I'm this alpha male. I got a soft side to me, unfortunately, that is a detriment to myself. And others. So I got to delegate properly to make sure things are done without that emotional connection. Anyway, in my world, that's what it is. So I think, I knew this hour would start going by really quick, but I want to talk about your follow-up on customers. Let's talk about that. Yeah. In your book, do you talk about, once you have a sale, how is the best way to keep coming?
Well, I'll talk about one of the chapters, which will show you that I definitely speak to it. So one of the chapters is called "Thank God It's Broken." And so the whole story behind the "Thank God It's Broken" is that, a lot of times, you'll buy a product and, and the sales guy's all over you, drooling all over you to get the business or whatever. And, then the product breaks down and you're calling the guy and all you're doing is getting his voicemail, right? And he, and the guy's, this thing's broken, and maybe he passes it off internally, but he's kind of like hiding from you, right? And doesn't want to deal with the problems, doesn't let customer service, my attitude is completely different, right? Is that when you sell the product, that's when you want to amp up your availability to the guy, because that's when the forever customer is formed in the after sale, right? Everyone knows you're going to be the nice guy and all friendly and shaking their hand and happy to see them when you're going to buy something. The question is, how do you treat them after they've bought the product, right? So if something is broken, with your customer, that's a great opportunity for you to over service them, even if it's not your job. Like, you take the call, the guy says, hey, it's broken. And you say, okay, and maybe it completely is someone else's job. You've got to get them involved. You say, oh my God, no problem. Hang on, let me three-way in with my service manager, right? You say, hey, Bob, it's Jack over, in sales, I've got this guy on the line, he's having a problem with his widget, can we get him hooked up with some service? And then, and then they two start talking. You say, let me drop off. I'll leave you two to it and I'll follow up with you. And then a couple of days later, you phone the guy. Did service take care of everything you need? You know what? They said it's going to be fixed tomorrow. Let me drop it off. I'm going to be there anyways. I'm going to be in the lobby tomorrow at 10, and then, you go there and you say, look, why don't you give me a mini tour? We'll set it up, and those kind of things. Right. And then the guy knows, hey, when this thing's broken, this guy's all over me. Like, and I mean, I'm just making up sort of a scenario for you but that's where the guy knows later when you quote him something and you're 3% too higher than the other guy. And he's like, yeah, but I know Glenn's always there when it's broken, and I'd rather pay 3% for that service.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really good advice. I know that this is I have a shortcoming, and I talk to my students about this quite often. Sometimes when I come in, in the studio world, right? When I come in, the highest rank is here or whatever, whatever that cliche is. Yeah. In the martial arts world, I hate all the titles of grandmaster, all that kind of this stuff. Because when somebody introduces themselves, I'm grandmaster so and so, I just roll my eyes in the back of my head and go, "You are a douchebag." Just shut your mouth. You know what I mean? Yeah. And so I try not to do that so much. And then I find myself not appreciating everybody like I should. Like, when I come in, I should be shaking hands with everybody. Hey, how's your day? How's your kids? How's everything going? And I just don't do that every day. And this is something I've done for many years, and I know my weaknesses in myself. Yeah. So I don't know if you apply that to your books on trying to know because people have to know themselves. They know where their weaknesses are, and they know where their strengths are, and they know where they lack. And I personally try to be better at that, to make sure that, hey, good morning, how you doing? Because there's, now I'm in a position that brand new students, especially little 3-year-olds, I may not even know all their names just yet because they haven't got to my world, right? I'm kind of the higher ranking guy that when the kids get to a certain level, they get to me.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's already that persona. Oh man, you're getting ready to go to Mr. Cox's
class.
The
way I handle that is like, I have this like, it's not a character defect because I could, but I mean, I have this issue where like when I first get to work in the morning, I'm always grouchy. You know what I mean? And I kind of like don't want anyone to talk to me, right? Like people are like, "How was your weekend?" I'm like, "What weekend? It's already Monday." Like, shut up. You know what I mean? Like, but it's only at like 8 a.m. that it's kind of like when you get home from work, and the wife's smart enough to give you those 15 minutes to get changed and relax and just chill out, and then you come downstairs and then you can tell them how your day was, right? And so what I would do and what I do here, right, is I have program times where I do a walk around. So I isolate myself from having to be nice when I'm grouchy. And I program in times where I'm doing my walk around. They know at 10 a.m. the boss is coming around to say hi. And hopefully your students and your instructors are all, falling into line and being attentive to your presence as well, right? And so they know when to expect you, when not to expect you. And you sort of build in these little routines that protect you from your own character defects but also turn it into a strength at the same time, right? Like do walk-arounds at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., 1 and 3. Just checking the mats, just checking the floors, kick a couple things, make sure the water cooler's working, whatever it is you got to do in your thing. I go through the warehouse twice a day, like clockwork, right? And it's not always at the exact same instant, but it's around the same time every day. And I say hello to everyone. And some days I stop and talk a bit more, and some days I just walk in with a gait, knowing they just need to say hello to me. And there are other times when they know I'm going to stop, and then we have more of a chat, right? And so I just build in all these little routines to help guide my day and protect myself. And in the morning, I try to make myself scarce until I've acclimatized to being at the office and I'm willing to say hi to everybody, right? And that's
good.
Yeah.
It's good. So it's pretty universal across, because I know myself, right? I know there's certain people that, you can't wait to be around. And there's other people that you're like, they're here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And at the same time that you say that, you're like, they're here, but they've also chose me to be the one to teach. Right.
Right.
And so it's such a give and take.
Part of the problem is that you're losing it's your lack of feeling like you're losing control. Like when they're foist upon you, you don't have the ability to say yes or no to the situation. Whereas I would go in the back door, and when you look out and you see that, old Granny Grouchy is out there on the floor again with her 7 kids and ready to bitch you out or whatever, you go out on your terms, right? You go when you're ready to have a brave face on, right? You don't walk right past her at 8 o'clock in the morning when you're in a bad mood, right? And so that's how, that's basically how I do.
That's 100% true too, because I've done exactly that, because I've got cameras on the mat and I'm like, oh man, I'm not going out there just yet. You know what?
Exactly,
and I put my armor on when I'm ready. I'm like, all right, I've had a cup of coffee. I'm ready not to take somebody's head off, and out I head, and away I go. That's such good advice. That's why I said it. All that stuff is so universal. It's just kind of funny.
It is, for sure. Yeah.
It's just kind of funny. Yeah. So you know what, Glenn, this hour's already going. I'm going to let you have the last couple minutes here to go ahead and give your where people can kind of find your stuff, where they can follow you.
Sure.
And I'll have all your stuff for your book. You can just name your book one more time, and people can probably buy it on Amazon. Because I can tell you this, I wrote a book, and when I had to sign personal copies and send them to Canada, the postage was more than the book. It was like a freaking nightmare. I said, it's just easier. Right. It's just easier to get it on Amazon and get it where it's at, for sure. I'm sure it's the same way coming back this way. So take a couple minutes there. Talk to the audience and about what you have, and let me hear some words of wisdoms before we end today.
you can go to my website, glennpoulos.com, and you can link to any one of my social medias, but it's also easier. Just go to LinkedIn, type in Glenn Poulos there. You'll find me there. I have tons of followers there. I interact with them all day. I'm all very active on LinkedIn, but you can find me elsewhere as well, or on my website. The book's available at all the places, Barnes & Noble, Amazon. In Canada, we have a company called Chapters. It's available there. And happy to talk to anyone that has any questions, comments, would like to banter about something. Just send me a note on my website or on LinkedIn. Happy to talk. And I guess the final nugget that I want to leave you with is one of my chapters, which I call, "You only get forever to make another impression." And so, people are like, "Well, wait a minute, that's not what my mom told me. My mom said I need to make a good first impression." I'm like, "Yep, your mom was right." And now I'm telling you that you need to make a good first impression, every impression, because every time you make an impression, you're making an impression. So when they're shitty, they're bad. And so, so the way I explain it is that when you know that you're going to be in a situation where people are examining your behavior or whatever, always excel at what you're doing. And I give the examples of being in a trade show. When you're at a trade show with your coworkers, they're sitting down and their feet are sore and they're whining about the long day or whatever. You want to be out in the aisleway, pulling customers into your booth to tell them about your latest product. When the boss is walking by your desk, always be working. Always be on point. Say, "Hey, boss, I got a question for you. When's that new thing coming out? I've got this deal cooking. I think it would be perfect." Always be engaging. Always be making a good impression, because if you're making an impression that's not good, it's bad. And so, you think these little things don't matter, but they add up. Imagine if the boss walks by your desk every day for, a few weeks, and every time he walks by, he sees you on Facebook or Instagram. And then when you see him, you alt tab over the CRM or something, right? By the second time, you're a bum, and you got a long way to go to get back out of that status, right? So you only get forever to make another impression. Make it count.
Such a good way to end that. Really, really good. Now, do you also have a podcast, Glenn, at all?
I do. Yeah. It's called the Profit Powerhouse Podcast. And it's available where all podcasts are downloaded from. Apple.
All downloaded.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good, man. I really, really enjoyed my hour with you. I'll have this on audio. We'll get it out to the audience. As soon as I have it downloaded, I'll send it off to you so you have it for yourself. Thanks, that you can share it. Sound
That's
good?
Amazing. Yeah, thank you. I'm looking forward to that.
Thanks, sir, man.
Thanks,
awesome hour. Good to meet you.
Same
have
here.
a good day, sir.
You've been listening to Real Talk with Mark Cox. Real life, real topics, real conversation. We're passionate about motivation, fitness, self-defense, weight loss, and coming at it from a real angle. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you had fun. We know we did. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on Instagram and Facebook at MarkCox100. Make sure to subscribe and review. And tell a friend or two about the show. For more, hit up the website at markcox.com. Till next time, keep it real.